welcome to Delhi Dialogues Leadership Summit 2021, organized by the very efficient people behind Policy Circle. You can catch them online at policycircle.net. Anil Nair is the brain behind it, founder and editor of Policy Circle. Tata Steel has been kind enough to associate with this event and help us put this together. We thank Tata Steel as well. And we also tell our viewers who are joining us right now and who will be watching this at some point online, hopefully very soon, that there are two more events coming up on the 21st of August and the 28th of August, which will cover a wide variety of issues, and we have eminent panels for all of them. Today, however, we focus on winning strategies, how some corporates have not let the COVID-19 pandemic deter them at all and have made this pandemic, have pivoted from their traditional positions and have made this the best 3-4 quarters that those companies have seen. We'll talk about all of that, but first let me introduce my eminent panel. We'll start, of course, with Dr. Aruna Sharma, former Steel Secretary in the Government of India. Thank you so much for joining us. Your credentials, of course, in governance are impeccable. Joining you today will be Anagha Deodhar. She's Chief Economist, I beg your pardon, at ICICI Securitues. Thank you for joining us. Pankaj Poddar, who is CEO of Cosmo Films, joins us as well. He, of course, is somebody who knows about pivoting in tough times. He's done so recently himself, launching and diversifying in the last 12 months. We'll talk a bit about that as we go along. Anil Nair, of course, founder and editor of Policy Circle, will be joining us as well. Thank you all for being part of Delhi Dialogues. This is a unique opportunity to discuss what we have seen in the past 2 years, what we have now, and what we can expect going forwards in terms of corporates, small size, mid caps, large corporates, beating the COVID pandemic economically, of course, and physically as the rest of the country does it as well. Let me start with you, Pankaj Poddar, to ask you simply, the sheer amount of corporates, not just in India, but also abroad, who have turned this pandemic, a huge disadvantage, around by pivoting, by diversifying, by making to-order material, going away from their comfort zones. Is that all it takes for corporates to have a winning strategy in a pandemic situation like this? Or does it require far more than just pivoting and great marketing?
Thanks, Athar, for the nice opening, and thanks, Anil, for organizing this, and thank you, Dr. Aruna, for taking time to join this. So, Athar, to begin, I would say that Cosmo had been into a segment which was, into essentials, which is packaging for, the food, for the pharma. But I can tell you that starting the operations last year was quite a bit of challenge. There was utter confusion all around in terms of what has to be started, when has to be started. Most of the supply chain was under lockdown. And I think one of the critical learnings during that phase was that you need to communicate really fast and you need to take actions all the time. That's what exactly we did, that, we virtually motivated everyone, go to the government office, take necessary approvals, talk to the suppliers, make sure that they start their plants, talk to the customers, make sure that the life keeps going. So that was one of the things. The other challenge with us was that, we had planned for several diversifications, several new expansions. And for some point in time, it looked like, everything had come to a standstill. Whosoever you talk to during those days, very pessimistic period, everybody suggested you do not do capex, do not do diversification. It is the time to watch, see things, make sure that you preserve your cash flows. And we decided, no, we are not going to stop our diversification plans. We will go on an expansion spree. We had announced a polyester line as far as our film business is concerned. But we are getting into a lot of newer businesses, master batches, textile chemicals, Ziggly for pet care, and then, FMCG launch as well, which we decided later on once we said that we need to do something to fight the COVID. Very challenging, but I think a lot of learnings. I have a small presentation which I can very quickly show to the audience. So some of these things, I'm not sure if the presentation has come. Is it showing on the screen? Yeah, it's taking time. Just a second.
As it loads on, I can just stack in a question of my own before I go to Anagha and Dr. Sharma as well. You, of course, mentioned, yes, I think it's just coming on right now. But you also, did you see opportunity much before the pandemic really hit? Because, we're talking about Cosmo Films, you're in packaging films business, but you've gone into FMCG now. I believe June this year is when you formalized your entry. You have a new product out as well. What kind of opportunities, not just opportunities, I think that's the wrong word here, but what kind of revenue do you expect? And is there demand enough for the kind of products you're coming out with? And what has the response been like? If you could, I know the numbers, it's public record. I've seen your quarter figures as well, and they're impressive. Let me tell you that. But, if you could just expand on that.
So obviously nobody could have planned for the pandemic. We had planned for expansions, and uh, actually COVID just struck totally unplanned. And the first day it was clearly announced that everything had to be shut down. And we were waiting for the opportunity that the moment government asked us to restart, we have to restart with the entire planning. The good thing is that we never stopped communication with the team, irrespective of the shutdown, irrespective that we were not working. Every day we used to have 2 to 3 hour call in terms of how to react the moment government gives a green flag back to us, and that's exactly we did. In fact, first few days there was so much confusion all around. People were reluctant to go out. Police was not allowing because police was doing their job. Uh, Very challenging situation. But on the other side, starting getting some people from overseas was again a challenge. So we started our master batch line way back in July last year. And supplier said, sorry, we can't come. You have to install. We can give you support digitally. And the team did phenomenal job in terms of saying that we'll take digital support and start this.
Okay.
Similarly, we had office shutdowns multiple times. We had to work from home on many occasions. Hardly 20-30% staff was coming when we were allowed to start. But communication was very critical, and that's what we continued doing, making sure that people are talking to each other. We are aligning things. We had to do a lot of hiring. We hired close to 200 people in last 1.5 years, and we are going to hire another 500-600 people over next 1 year. But we said, let's stick to the plan, preserve our cash flows, but make sure that we do everything that we can do in our hands.
Okay, I can see one part of what we've just been put on the screen right now. It'll be interesting to go through it when we do have the time as well. I want to quickly rotate, and Dr. Sharma, I want to swivel to you and ask you clearly. Part of what we are seeing right now, the whole world has changed. It has learned to adapt with the pandemic of this proportion. Not in 100 years did the world have anything like this. So, but adaptability has also come thick and fast as far as not just corporates are concerned. Entire sectors of the economy are adapting in ways that they could not have done, let's say, even 15, 20 years ago. And technology has a big part to play in it. We also see, Dr. Sharma, and it's very clear to everyone who's watching and observing how the economy has behaved post the pandemic. It's very clear to see the people, the companies or firms, as well as corporates that have embraced newer technology and technology-based solutions, technology-based markets have survived, have managed to keep their heads above water, and have also prospered. I'm talking about IT solutions, I'm talking about tech, I'm talking about all such sectors related to new technology. Is that what it will take now in a post-pandemic world, Dr. Sharma, for companies, mid-cap, small-cap, big conglomerates to stay afloat, keep changing as the demand and need change?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Atta. You're absolutely right. What Mr. Pankaj also mentioned, this is the time which gave a breather to everybody, and it enabled them to sort of work upon it and go back to the drawing table. Now, going back to the drawing board, what was very, very important is that whichever areas can be automated, the future is they will be automated. This is going to be absolutely clear that automation is going to come in a very big way. and everywhere they can do away with the manpower. This is going to happen. So let us be mentally geared for it of this transformation. Second thing that happened is the people use the technology. And you find that V curve change came wherever they use the technology or use the technology to enter the new markets. Like if you look at textiles, then textiles use this opportunity to spread in the European Union, which recovered faster, and US. And literally, we had our towels and linens spreading in those markets like anything. Similarly, you will find in the core sectors in India, the steel, the cement, the related sectors, they started working on rejigging themselves, and they took the advantage of again exports during the lockdown in India. But the moment our infrastructure started, they started gearing into it. So automation is one, adoption of technology is two, and third is even the metal sector is now going for the e-commerce platform. So that is going to be a new transformation where the new way of marketing your goods, whether it is B2B or B2C, it is going to be on e-platforms. So wherever we had stable policies, you saw a better recovery. Where we are still having fluctuating policies, there are problems. So I think to begin with, I can say this.
And there are countless stories, and I'm sure both Pankaj Poddar and Anagha, who's back with us now, I can see, will testify to this. During the 18-month odd COVID-infected India we've seen the past 2 years, companies, even startups for that matter, those who have innovated on the spot, those who've pivoted, those who've diversified on the spot immediately after the COVID pandemic hit, have managed to do well. I mean, I was reading about stories, Anagha, and if you could comment on this as well, how Sri Shakti, I believe the name of the company is. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it as well. Diversified, other such companies, who started making. People who used to make utensils, very small cap, started making food dispensers for sanitizers, using that kind of ingenuity to turn a bad situation into a good one. Is that inherent sort of innovation the mainstay in the future now?
I mean, yes, absolutely. See, there are a couple of very interesting trends that we observed post the onset of COVID. One trend I would like to highlight here is the inequality. So, inequality, which was already quite bad in India, started worsening after the onset of COVID. And
I think slight issue there with Anagha Deodhar's connection there. But if I could just keep this conversation going, and the talk about inequality clearly is a very important one, and we must have it, I believe, in this session as well. Till the time Anagha comes back, I want to turn this back around to Pankaj Poddar as well. Pankaj, we saw, and I keep stressing on the word innovation here because we've seen over the past 2 years companies who have indeed gone into markets hitherto unknown. I mean, let's talk about your companies as well. You come from a packaging films background. There was always demand for that. You also gone into synthetic paper, if I'm not wrong. But your latest push seems to be in hitherto unknown areas for you. I saw an interview of yours where you said that you took about 12 months on the drawing board really to come up with that liquid, the textile chemical product that you come out with as well, and that takes a lot as well. But do you think that the demand for this, because it is a new market, if I'm not wrong. I mean, you're also learning as you go along as well. What have you seen in terms of growth prospects and demand for high specialty products, I believe you call them, that you've launched recently?
Yeah, so you're right. We are definitely working towards specialization. That's what we feel is very important in today's world. And Fabritizer is again one such product that we launched, which we felt that, viruses, we see more and more viruses coming in last few years. And looks like, either hopefully it's not a biological war, it was natural. But seeing the trend, it looks like that, more things will continue to impact the humankind in the times to come. And therefore, whatever we can contribute as a corporation, we certainly tried doing that by bringing Fabritizer. Actually, it was a part of our textile chemical division, where we came out with another product which gives virus protection for 50 washes. And then we said, can we do something for our consumer as well? And we launched, though we were not into FMCG, and we decided to, get into that, saying that, yeah, here is a product which consumers can use, make their clothes virus free for 7 days, and actually even beyond, it continues to give though a little lesser protection. So it's a new dive into a new area which we are not so familiar with. We are ready to learn and try and expand it and grow it.
But your market evaluation also your stock has been good. It's taken to it really, and I believe because this is public knowledge, I'm sharing it right now, and that I believe your growth projection is somewhere in the upwards of 100 crores in the next 4 years. Is that right? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that is the aspirational goal that we are having. And once you get into FMCG, you have to launch more products. You cannot just stick to one product. But there are a lot of multiple areas that we have invested in the recent areas from a future growth perspective. Specialty textile chemicals, beautiful area, master batches, where again only 3-4 international players are there. So our focus is a lot more on innovation, employee first strategy, uh, digitization in a significant way, and then keep spending on innovation so that we can bring newer things to the market with a very strong sales force which can communicate the message to the customers.
Interesting.
So we
I think we again have all our panelists with us now. I think we lost Anagha for a while. Anagha, I'll ask you to be slightly more patient because I believe at this point we should go ahead with. I believe Pankaj, we have access. All of us have access to your presentation now. If you could quickly run through it, so we could go to Anagha for remarks after.
Okay, so I'll go very fast given the time. So first is all
We
of
have
us.
time. We have time. I'm just saying to make up for all the technical snafus, we
All
can
right.
take your presentation first, and then we can go to
Sure,
Anagha.
sure, sure. So some of the things that we feel that must be done. One is create a strong business continuity plan. Some of us may not have planned for COVID type of an event, so we'll have to be better prepared in terms of our continuity plan. You talked about automation, digitization. I'll give you some examples. Actually, obviously nobody thought about COVID, but 3 years back we said we'll not invest anymore in desktop. Let all the replacements be done with only laptops. So last 2-3 years we bought close to 250-300 laptops. That helped work from home. Similarly, we made sure that customers put their orders into the system. So we were focusing digitization, automation in a very significant way in last 4-5 years. That definitely helped us. That we can restart the operations fairly fast. Uh, Continuously give trainings to our employees with the latest technologies so that not just you have the technology but people know how to use them. That is equally very important. And invest time and money in researching newer products which are need of the hour. uh, Focus on that and build a way, because India, we have never been spending on research. And last few years, Cosmo has changed focus. We today have more than 30 people in the research and development, and they continue to do a phenomenal job in terms of bringing a lot of new innovations to the table. So I'll definitely strongly emphasize that Indian companies should really look at innovation in a big way in the times to come. The way world is moving, we need to catch up all the time really fast. Some of the other things, be ready to adapt to new business models. Some of the companies really showed how quickly they changed the business model. Some airlines companies shifted to logistics model. Some hotels changed their premises into hospitals. So there were companies who were ready to change in a very fast way. They said, we understand that this has impacted our industry. Let's think different. Let's do something which can, which can make sure that this stay afloat. Obviously, never keep all your eggs in one basket. Digital is going to be the new normal. I think every person in India will have to learn digital, and we have very short period of time. We do not have the luxury. By 2025, I feel everybody who has to progress need to learn the basic digital part. In fact, as part of our Cosmo Foundation, we teach around 18,000 students, where we put a computer lab in every government school. Uh, into these small villages, and then our teachers go and teach computer. Very, very critical in the times to come. And when we go to the villages, we see so many people are not as much, though obviously number of mobiles are going up, internet is growing, but I think digital is going to be the new normal. keep communicating. As I said earlier, especially during these situations, you need to make sure that you're talking to all your stakeholders on a very regular basis: customers, vendors, employees, shareholders. You need to talk. You need to tell them what you're doing, and keep your team motivated. Because these situations, everybody tend to get demotivated, tend to feel sad. You need to really boost their morale. You have to keep your morale up, and you need to keep their morale really high. Uh, some of the other things that we did during the pandemic, we improved our artificial intelligence. So we hired resources. We started doing, we implemented WhatsApp chatbot. We did robotic process. So we started doing, which I think company of our size, 2,500 crores, some companies may not be investing, but we felt that it is important that some of these advanced technologies, we must keep investing there. Facilitated our customers to order online, improved on digital lead generation capabilities. So given that travel was not there, we invested very heavily on the digital lead generation. And we were so happy with the results that even for the newer businesses like textile chemical or Cosmo Ferrites, which is again part of our group company, right from day one that we started investing, we got very significant inquiries, purely based on the digital lead generation thing that we did. And then we improved our digital infrastructure to promote remote work, keep on investing on the security part, on the digitization part, make sure people can access SAP system or other ERP system from their home. Instill confidence, morale boosting, promote remote working. So we actually, some of the employees wanted to come to the office and we told them, look, it's better to stay at home. Let's not take risk because that can make situation more serious for us. Motivated employees through various initiatives. We did a lot of webinars. I mean, we did customer webinars, we did employee webinars. So almost once or twice in a week, we used to do knowledge webinars where different departments used to share the knowledge. Whosoever had to come to the plant because the production has to run, we created really safe working environment. I can tell you that within Cosmo, we had far lesser cases of COVID, though our offices were in Maharashtra, Gujarat, Delhi, which were more affected by the COVID, especially Delhi and Maharashtra. But the percentage employees getting infected were far lesser because of whatever we did. And then now we are facilitating free vaccination drive for all our employees. We are even requesting them by certain date, let's do vaccination. So we are educating them a lot because some of them had a fear that if they are not going for a vaccination. So that is another area where we are educating them. We are communicating with them that it's not just about you, it's about the safety of others also. And this is something, government and all the research bodies have done enough research to come out with vaccinations. So let's go ahead and do the vaccinations. Critical thing going forward, clearly digital infrastructure, communication. Extra liquid cash. Some of the industries had the habit of over investing. I think we need to learn that we need to always have some liquid cash, whether it's at the personal account or a corporate account, we need to have liquid cash. Optimize debt ratios, must invest in research and development, and change management and act fast. I think some of the companies were having a laid back attitude during that time that let's see what happened. We'll start the plant after a month, 2 months, and they were just too late. And when they started, they faced similar challenges vis-a-vis the companies which started much earlier. So I think change management and acting fast is a game. And I think one of the things is what could be the wish list for the manufacturing sector from the government perspective, given that we have the government representatives here too. One is to improve infrastructure.
Former IAS, she's of course.
So I can leave this slide.
38 years of government experience, but that still counts.
Yeah.
The wish list, always the wish list. Yes.
Yeah. But anyways, I think we can talk about any other questions you have. So that's briefly I have to talk about.
Seriously, I have to say that simple, straightforward solutions, innovate or become irrelevant. Digitization is the way forward. Clearly, if you're not digital, it's going to be harder and harder for you as an entity to survive in the post-pandemic world. And I think your presentation clearly highlights that as well. One, of course, a couple of questions on the presentation because that I presume was how you moved forward with your radical diversification and pivoting plan through the pandemic. But I want to get Anagha's views before we delve into your presentations as well. Anagha, you spoke earlier, and I think it's important we address this about inequalities now being stressed even further post a pandemic world. Everybody in this world has been affected by the pandemic, be it at a personal level, at the economic level, at the social level. But what we also see, and some would say, Anagha, it's a worrying trend that the bigger you are in the corporate world, not just in India, I'm talking about it's a worldwide trend we've seen. The bigger you are, the more profits you post during and post the pandemic. It seems that you seem to be creating a large, unassailable chasm between those who will recover fairly quickly from the pandemic and those who will recover and become even bigger. This chasm needs to be addressed. It's not just about inequality, Anagha, it's also more about equity and not having equity in a post-pandemic world. Do you think I'm on to something here?
Absolutely, because you are again highlighting what most economists are saying. Because when the pandemic started, there was a lot of debate as to what kind of recovery we'll have from the pandemic, whether it will be a V-shaped recovery, whether it will be a U-shaped recovery. And soon after we started getting corporate results, and as the pandemic evolved, the view strengthened that it is likely to be a K-shaped recovery, because you'll have the organized sector which will continue doing well and which will continue thriving during the pandemic, and the unorganized sector, which doesn't have deep pockets, which doesn't have easy access to finance, will not do as well as the organized sector, and that will lead to a divergent K-shaped recovery. Globally, also, we have seen that the developed economies, which had access to vaccines much sooner and at a much wider scale than the developing markets, they started recovering much sooner than the developing markets. So, divergent recovery is a theme, not just globally, but also within India, because we've seen that, like I said, the organized sector has started doing well. If you see the corporate profits, the corporate results since Q1 of FY21, and now we have 5 quarters, results of 5 quarters since the pandemic started. The consistent theme is corporate sector has been doing well, the organized sector has been doing well, and the unorganized sector has not been doing particularly well. And this has implications for a lot of things. For example, I mentioned earlier that there is widening inequality in the country. People who were not that affected by the pandemic, people who could work remotely, who could work from home, they didn't lose their jobs. They continued getting their regular salaries and they were not that badly affected. But blue collar workers or people whose jobs could not be performed manually, they were the worst affected. So the burden was the heaviest for those who could afford the least. And this has implications for consumption, because if a lot of people lose their jobs, a lot of people don't have regular source of income during and after the pandemic, what does it mean for consumption expenditure going ahead? So if you look at which sector of the economy will drive the recovery, it is as of now the investments which are likely to drive the recovery in FY22 and 23. And we expect consumption to languish. It will fall short or it will fall behind investments, at least in the near term. And it's only in the medium term, when we completely recover from this pandemic, that consumption could post the kind of growth that we were used to seeing. Also talking about different economic agents, there was also, I think, this World Bank report which said that women were most affected during the pandemic, because work from home led to schools were shut, and the burden of childcare falls primarily on women. So women workers were more affected than male workers. So it has had different impact to different varying degrees on different economic agents, and this has implications for how soon and how well we recover from this pandemic.
Uh, One interesting point I picked up on, and before I go back, of course, to the level really of government intervention in boosting the demand, boosting consumer spending, really, and direct interventions by the government. And I'll go to Dr. Sharma for that. I want to pick up on one point you mentioned, which is very interesting. Tell me if I'm wrong here, but at some level, Anagha, isn't it in corporates, whatever size, maybe big size corporates, mid caps, small caps, in their own vested interest to make sure they do enough, at least something, to make sure that this chasm doesn't really completely decimate the very market that will drive growth? If there are no people who have any spending power, if the chasm begins to grow wider and gnawing at our economy, then it's going to be, though old adage here, one couple of percent of the country controlling 95% of the economy, and that's not good for any country, be it India or any other country there.
So this is a very valid point. I mean, for any corporate to function and thrive, you need a large market, a large domestic market to function in. And if you have a large part of the economy which is not able to afford the products or services that a corporate is offering, the corporate cannot sell what it is selling. So it is true that for the entire country, the market should exist and the market as a whole should thrive. This is a valid point. But at the same time, if you look at the situation that we went through, the pandemic situation, there was very little any agent as such could do to, arrest the negative effects of the pandemic. The government did its the best it could do in terms of the support it offered. The central bank did the best it could do in terms of the support it offered. And if we talk about corporates, I think they took a lot of initiative in terms of vaccinating their employees, vaccinating employees' families. Because vaccination, if you talk any stimulus for it to be sustainable, the biggest stimulus is people going out and starting to spend money. That is the biggest and the most sustainable stimulus that the economy can get. And that can only come when the pace of vaccination picks up, and enough people are vaccinated, they feel confident to go out and spend. So I think on their part, the corporates did participate very actively in the vaccination drive, vaccinating their employees and their families. So the bit that they could do, I think they did their best.
Very interesting. And I want to go to Dr. Sharma also. Do you also have a presentation for us, Anagha? If we do, we can circle back to it.
Yes, I do have a presentation on the services sector, but okay.
I think we can circle back to services immediately after I asked Dr. Sharma about direct government intervention, the possibility of it, what the reality is, and what more the government can do or has done in the past couple of years. Your view, as somebody who has years and years of governance, clearly nobody saw this coming. As I mentioned before, Dr. Sharma, we learned along the way. We made some mistakes, admittedly, not just at the government level, but also as a society, as individuals. But we're learning and learning to tackle this pandemic, and not just our economic recovery, generally our well-being as humans, of course. We're also learning that as we go along. But on that specific point of government, direct government intervention, and the government doing enough, perhaps not enough, to boost demand, to put some cash, spending cash in the hands of people who most need it, people who will be in that bottom K of the recovery, as Anagha mentioned. And that bottom K line seems to be the heavier one, if at all this is going to be a K-shaped recovery. What's the outlook for those people?
Very rightly said. Actually, if you have a look at it, you will find few things which were done very effectively during the first wave, and few faltering which happened during the second wave. So I will dwell on both of them. So if you look at the first wave, what came as a package, doing away with the reduction in the corporate tax and encouraging for the investment, it did not go for the capital investment immediately, but it helped the bigger industries to clean up their balance sheets and therefore have more liquidity with them. So that was the first impact which they had, and they started thinking of liquidity. The second is the digital payment, which was done up very well pre-pandemic, where we made RTGS 24/7, NIFT 24/7. Your MTR rates were brought down. So immediate during lockdown, the surge which came in the digital payment was a big enabler to go ahead. So that became very helpful instead of bringing everything to a standstill. Then another thing which happened was, of course, a little problem which happened in not handling the migrant laborers issues very well, but giving a boost to the Manrega expenditure. That also made a difference by bringing in the wages, and therefore in FMCG, if you find, the rural market was doing well. Then we have been blessed by nature by a reasonably good monsoon even now. So the crop yield has been very, very good. So there is a money in the rural market, and therefore some of the FMCG goods started getting into a cycle of being consumed, and that made a difference. There were some attempts of a direct benefit transfer of 500 rupees, which is not a very big amount, but then okay, there was a tokenism into it of sending that 500 rupees in. But major thing which happened was a Manrega expenditure in a very big way, a good crop produce which happened. And here what you did it into the sector. Then most important thing that happened was the e-commerce platform. You find a hybrid model. You had the hybrid model which came up. So traditionally in unorganized sector, which were into small shops, brick and mortar shops, they started experimenting by selling their hot cooked food, the home kitchens, the cloud kitchens. So you started getting these, not at all organized or having a label. These kind of people started exploring the new areas of getting into the market and reaching the consumers. So they piggy ride on the established platforms and were able to do it. So, and that also enabled, if you find in a very big way, that slowly now the hybrid model, like I said before, is emerging. So they are both the physical shops as well as they are also keeping the inventory as a supply chain through the e-commerce. The biggest thing that happened was that the treatment which started happening to the textiles, they started coming up that you have a microbe resistant bread linens, microbe resistant towels. I don't know efficacy of it, but then it did catch the eye of the buyer of going in for these kinds of goods. So yes, all these are started moving towards the V-shaped recovery even after the second wave, and then now an increased rate of vaccination.
So, just a clarification here. Are you of the view that we're talking about a V-shaped recovery here? Because there is some
No, definitely not.
debate on the model of recovery. What alphabet is India going to be? It depends on who you ask. You have an opinion, everywhere.
I say an N shape, letter N, because you will have the sectors which will have a weak recovery, and you will have a sector which will be completely going down and will take time, because some sectors may get completely wiped out also of all
And
you
that's
do.
the danger, that's the danger.
Yeah.
I want to go back to
Yeah.
one sector which saw tremendous growth in spurts, I would say. Anagha, you have a presentation for us in the services sector. Just to give some perspective to our viewers before you go into that, if you look at the past, I think 1 year globally, what are the kind of companies that have actually added to their bases, added to their markets? These are companies like Uber Eats, or Grubhub, or other such platforms who have increased not just their market caps, not just their size, not just their user base, but also their valuations. Is it because of the fundamental nature of a pandemic where you prefer things being brought to you rather than venturing outside, the kind of service element that it entails, really? And what kind of future do we see even after the world, let's say, has recovered more or less from the current levels of the pandemic in this sector?
So I'll quickly start by talking about the contact intensity of the services sector. So, the pandemic affected different sectors differently. And during the first 2-3 months of hard lockdown, the services sector was very badly hit. And that is mostly because the services by nature are very contact intensive compared to manufacturing. So early on, soon after the onset of the pandemic, we calculated the contact intensity score for different sectors of the economy. One from the perspective of final demand, do you need to come in contact with other people to consume these goods and services? And one, the contact intensity of the production process of each sector. So, from both the perspectives, our analysis showed that services are the most contact intensive sector of the economy by a wide margin. And that is more from the final demand perspective than from the production process perspective. So here you'll see that manufacturing and agriculture compared to services are way less contact intensive than services. And this also showed in the manufacturing versus services PMI. So soon after the lockdown started, the services PMI completely nosedived and almost became 5.4, and manufacturing fared relatively better. And even during the second lockdown, during March, April of this year, services took a bigger hit than manufacturing. And even when it comes to recovery, manufacturing recovered faster than services. So this shows that both the waves, first wave and second wave, and the pandemic as a whole has hit services harder than any other sector of the economy. And what does the services sector in India look like? You have trade, which is wholesale and retail trade, which accounts for almost one fourth of the total service sector in the economy. And relatively financial services, which is banking, insurance, other financial services, they are a relatively much smaller part of the services sector. And what does this mean? I mean, if you look at why have some of these sectors, for example, banking sector has done relatively better, insurance has done relatively better. Why have these sectors performed better than some of the other sectors, such as trade, which was the hardest hit, trade, tourism, travel? So there are a lot of measures which the RBI took, which supported the financial services sector and also some of the contact intensive sectors in the economy. So I'll quickly cover 4 or 5 major policy measures that were taken by the central bank. The TLTRO, which is you borrow from the RBI and you lend on lend to the contact intensive sectors of the economy. That was a major policy measure which helped some of these companies stay afloat. Other policy measures such as banning dividend distribution by banks, deferment of some of the regulatory requirements such as the capital conservation buffer, that was deferred a couple of times so that banks could conserve capital and on-lend to productive sectors of the economy. Widening of the liquidity adjustment facility corridor. There was a moratorium which was given by the RBI and which was extended by 3 months. So that was a total 6-month moratorium. A lot of these policy measures together help the borrowers and the banks sail through these difficult times. I have already covered most of these measures here. And when the pandemic started, the expectation was the non-performing assets will shoot up to as high as 14.7% by March 2021. But the outturn has been much better than most people expected. So the actual outcome by March 2021 was 7.4%, and it's expected to be around 11.2% in the severe stress scenario. So
Well,
the
you know, just to interrupt for 1 second. I'm sorry, I'm doing this, but what do you think what do you think are the reasons for that? The kind of cushion that we see right now, the road not being as hard as most people had predicted it to be. What do you put that?
So I think that mainly happened because the corporate sector, like I said, has been doing better. So if you look at segment-wise non-performing assets, the corporate sector has not been under such a huge stress, and most of the stress is coming from the retail portfolio of banks. So banks that are heavily focused on the corporate sector, those are performing better than the retail-focused banks. And also, banks raised a lot of capital last year. So they didn't wait for a situation where things got really bad and then they started raising capital. Proactively, banks started raising capital to meet any severe stress scenario. And again, like I said, there was a moratorium which was given, there was regulatory forbearance. A lot of these regulatory requirements were pushed, they were deferred by 6 months. And a lot of these policy measures together collectively help banks sail through this. And like I again said, corporate sector, which is a big part of the lending, that has been doing better, because of which the stress has not been as bad as it was expected.
Okay, great. All fascinating stuff in your presentation as well. Obviously, if we like, we can go into details really. And if you could share that with us in a PDF form later after the session is over, Anagha, that'd be grateful. Of course, if you can go through that in detail. But let me go back and circle back to Pankaj here. And Pankaj, we've been, of course, talking about Dr. Javad talked about the measures, the hits and misses, really, where the government intervention did go right and where we could have done much better. And I keep saying this at the cost of repeating myself. Nobody really knows how to, deal with the pandemic. You learn along the way. You learn on the job. All of us are doing the same thing. It's no different for governments or corporates. But coming back to the central theme of today's session, which of course is what are the winning strategies? What worked in the worst pandemic in 100 years for corporates? And I'm talking about not really a specific kind of corporate or a conglomerate. I'm talking about general winning strategies to come out of a pandemic nobody really had seen for 100 years. What really can we put down to, apart from, of course, Pankaj, we talked about innovation, innovate or become irrelevant. All that, of course, has been covered. But what do you see as a common thread in companies of all sorts, corporates of all sorts, not just in India, but also in abroad, cutting across various sectors, cutting across various verticals here? What were the fundamentals that kept corporates afloat, corporates and their strategies sound? Do you think it's at a very base vision level of how the management thinks and takes on challenges, or do you believe it has got to do a lot with how strategies are actually implemented, with workforce taken at?
Yes, so see, one of the major changes that happened in last 4 5 years is that once this national company law tribunal was made, and companies which had over borrowed had to go through liquidation process. There was a lot of cleaning up done by this government 4 5 years back, and that made sure that corporates were very skeptical about taking too many loans in the balance sheet. Having said that, that also had a negative side because the growth did not happen. The private capital investment was very slow during these 5 6 years. uh, so one thing is everybody was keeping a very strong balance sheet. People are trying to change with the times because you see a lot of these startups getting phenomenal valuations over a very short period of time.
I was going to come
And
to that
that's how,
because that's been in the news, and I really want to talk about that. That's a very exciting part of this unicorn story we're seeing in India. But apologies for interrupting you. You just kind of took those words away from my mouth. I was about to say that.
yeah. So that's pushing some of very large corporates also to rethink. You see Reliance getting into so many newer generation businesses. Cosmo, we had been doing film business for 30 years, and then we decided to get into a pet care industry. And initially, when we decided to get into pet care industry, the whole world was, I mean, what the film has to do with the pet care industry? And even before we start, there is now so much noise. 3 days back, one of the startups got $37 million in in the pet care industry because all of a sudden there's a lot of noise. So a lot of these old corporates who were stuck up with one or two or three businesses, a lot of emotions around it, they said no, we have to change, we have to think differently, we have to adopt new business models, keep our balance sheet strong. So those were very fundamental changes that happened. Innovation is another thing that I think more and more corporates now have started realizing that they need to. Innovation is not just the science and technology, but creativity in everything that we do. Because a lot of these startups is nothing but creativity. They may not be using very high-end tools, but they think a new idea, they aggressively work on it, and you get phenomenal valuations. I mean, the other reason for such valuations is the world is looking at India to invest. That's the other reason that so much money is coming into India. But maybe large corporates also need to learn, which Reliance did this. They got phenomenal money during the during the lockdown period.
I think T-Mobile deal in Netherlands is next, and that's another new area that even a behemoth like Reliance is willing to bet on. And if that deal
Yeah.
does go through, it becomes a very major player in Europe, where it hasn't really been as keen to make a large footprint. But that's, of course, how large conglomerates, successful conglomerates, think. And I want to go back to something you mentioned right now, valuations, and I want to get the chief economist of the ICICI Securities, Anagha Deodhar's views on this spurt of these second round, third round valuations, which are breaking all records that we're seeing right now, and in such a diverse array, Anagha, of companies, of sectors as well. What do you make of that? Do you think it's just a flash in the pan, or is the India story well and truly back on track? Is that why all these companies, startups, are being given money by top investors? Name it. You have Sequoia Capital, you have a lot of British firms attracting a lot of money. I think we've lost Anagha, unfortunately, but we have lost a lot of time because of technical issues, unfortunately. I think we'll try and wrap this up as soon as we can. I think as soon as Anagha will come back. I think Anil Nair also has been listening very patiently for a while now. And Anil, if you have any comments at this point before we take questions, Anil, the floor is yours.
I think we need to wait for Javad, Dr. Javad Hassan to come and.
Oh yeah, of course. I completely
Yeah,
slipped my mind. He hasn't. Yeah,
he's
but
now in. So wait, he's there. He's almost ready there.
Right.
For now, let Dr. Aruna Sharma speak, and
Yeah,
after that we can get.
Oh, fantastic. Then let me just continue with my line of questioning here till
Yes.
Mr. Hassan does indeed join us, and I hope that'll be soon. Again, going back to these valuations that Pankaj mentioned, Dr. Sharma, these startups, they're various sizes clearly. He mentioned one in the pet care segment, they raised 37 million just the other day. There are many others, especially in the financial services, that are raising money from a lot of firms. What do you make of this valuation speed, this sudden spurt of money? Do you think this is here to stay, and will this sustain over the next few years?
Uh, I'm a little conservative on how long this will continue, because the whole thing is at this moment of time, the spare money is being put into these various startups and everything, where they feel the bet and where they think that the return on investment will be good. But the moment they find an alternative stable returns, which may be into the capex when the big core companies will start investing, then this trend of a huge demand or huge opportunity which people are seeing here is bound to come down. So this I find is a very well spaced, when the core companies are relying more on their own internal source of money instead of borrowing from the market, because of the burning their hands during the pandemic and keeping their liquidity and the way they are planning a little conservative. However, their plans are big. It is not that it is stopping them to expand. And that's why this money is getting more diverted into this end. So this is what is happening. But then it is equally important, which I will like to emphasize, is the consistency of policy. Because every fluctuation of policy, you will find the foreign investors, getting into a frenzy and sort of worrying about the surety when they will like to withdraw the money or encash the money or want to put more money into it. So this is going to happen. And like the uncertainty which is happening on the cryptocurrency versus the digital currency which is going to come up, that is also going to have an impact into this entire chain of investment, which we are able to see it at this moment of time. So
All right.
these are the steps we have to be careful.
Fair enough, fair enough. And I see Dr. Sharma, we have our final guest who has joined us, Javad Hassan. I can see him in the frame. Mr. Hassan, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for being part of this session. We, of course, have been talking for a while, waiting for you. And just to give you a quick recap of what we've been talking about, we, of course, have seen how companies, corporates of all sizes, have innovated, have pivoted, and those who have embraced technology, new and new technology, upcoming technology, went into their zones that they're not comfortable in and tried out new areas. That's what's helping corporates of all sizes not only keep afloat, but also grow in size, in business, and market cap. You, of course, are, Mr. Hassan, somebody who knows all about innovation, who knows all about embracing new technology. He, of course, Mr. Hassan, for those of us who are just joining us, is the chairman of the Nest Group. It's a conglomerate that has spread all around the world. It has offices and a footprint in Asia, in Europe, in the Americas as well. He, of course, is joining us from the US. Mr. Hassan, thank you for joining us. I'll leave the floor on to you to speak at length about what you feel has been the winning strategy, a winning strategy or multiple winning strategies for corporates who have not only survived the pandemic, but are looking to do well, changing this adversity into opportunity. Dr. Hassan, the floor is yours.
So you please continue the discussion. I will just find out what's happening as you said.
Fair enough. Fair enough. We'll keep it going, and let me go back to Pankaj for a bit here. Pankaj, what's the outlook going out now? We are approaching the last quarter, I believe, now in 2021. What's the outlook as far as the Indian economy is concerned on a macro level? I mean, let's not get into specifics. I believe we've spoken about not just what you were doing really with your companies, but also companies who've done similar pivots in the past year or so. What's the macro outlook as far as you're concerned?
So I think most segments are picking up. We see we just 2 days back saw the IIP numbers. I don't recall them, but they were definitely double-digit numbers and impressive numbers. Obviously, they're on a lower base numbers. Having said that, I think most sectors that we talk, are generally recovering fast. The only major challenge that I foresee is that a lot of commodities are becoming too expensive, and the global logistic issues are the other major challenges. If this continues in terms of cargoes getting held at one port or the other, it is going to affect international trade in a very big way in the times to come. And every 1 month they just keep delaying the recovery of this entire logistics things by a quarter. So earlier they were saying that from Jan 22 the international logistics will get better, but now the recent update is coming is that it may take till middle of 22, and that seems a major concern, especially for a country like India where we intend to increase exports very significantly. That can hurt the sentiments in the times to come if that is not taken care. So India will have to build its own shipping industry in a very serious way. The whole world was only relying on China alone till now, where all the containers, the ships, everything was constructed there. I think many countries will have to start building their own ships and so on and so forth.
If you don't mind me asking, Pankaj, how do you see the labor workforce, the unorganized sector, which forms a huge chunk of the Indian economy? How do you see um, the labor workforce being affected by the shift? I'm not just talking about automation, but I'm also talking about upgrades and upgradation of what companies are actually doing and the kind of skill sets required from those the labor workforce, which will now be a new kind of labor workforce, which they'll have to have enhanced skills, like you mentioned. If you're not digital or digital compliant, you're almost as good as a dead duck in the water. How does that huge swathe of India's labor force cope with that?
So see, I see a lot of labor of late getting engaged into delivery service. More and more companies are trying to give consumers the service at their residence, and therefore a lot of labor is getting engaged. One very large challenge with India is to educate this workforce, because we cannot keep deploying them in such low end jobs. They cannot just be the delivery boys, delivery girls. So I think a lot of emphasis need to be put, not just by the government but by the corporates. I think a lot of government schools are in a very bad shape. Government has to seriously look into this. Corporate has to come forward to work towards it. If we do not educate our workforce, we have a serious challenge 10 years from now, because the way world is digitizing, the way world is progressing, the way some of the large internet driven digitized companies are uh, becoming stronger and stronger. Many countries are even thinking that these companies can become stronger than a lot of economies in the world, and therefore India has a lot of strengths, but it needs to make sure that its manpower is educated, they can do these tasks far more efficiently, and then I think the next decade belongs to us.
Dr. Sharma, do you think? I think at some point in the discussion today, I mentioned. I think I was speaking to Anagha about this, and I want to get your views on this as well. As we see, the trend in the past 2 years, globally at least, has been, huge giant corporates like Amazon, like Tesla, like Apple, tech companies mostly, but also other companies like a motor car company. Audi is in the top 20 biggest grossers, people who've crossed their last valuation now. I think Amazon is at something about 401 billion US dollars in their current market cap right now. Do you think the space is going to shrink further and further for smaller players, for small caps, for mid caps, for startups? Or do you think there is space for them to not just innovate and make a niche for themselves? Or do you think at some point, pandemic or no pandemic, the way economies and the way big companies are controlling most economies and the kind of market shares that these people have, complete capture of the markets in their own sphere? Do you think big shark is just going to eat up small shark, and the interim period is just transition? Or do you not agree with that? Do you
No,
feel there is
no.
still space?
There is a space because I strongly feel the size of cake is increasing. The pie the diameter of the pie graph is going to increase. The consumption is going to be, sort of modified from the low level items. The consumers are going for the high end items. Everybody is climbing up the ladder in their consumption cycle. So under this, it is an opportunity for the startups to come up with a new line of products. And we have seen some of the startups doing very well. After a space and after they get a volume or share in the market, they are purchased by these big shops, or they get try to put their stake into it. But otherwise, there is always opportunities for these to come up and create the space for themselves. So this is bound to happen. It is not going to happen. But having said that, it is equally important that consolidation of these big companies is also taking place. There are many facilities what they have, and they are spreading across the globe, because as we say, the digitization has created a global village. So your products are going to the global village. So small startup can also put their product into this.
Right.
So in the sense, it becomes more symbiotic. Their spread and the smaller spread can be symbiotic instead of just being competitive to each other.
Well, I think time will tell. The jury's still out on that one, at least in the short to medium term. We, I believe, have Mr. Hassan back with us. I do hope this time, Mr. Hassan, you can hear us clearly. And we are ready, of course, for your opening remarks. And thank you again, Mr. Hassan, for joining us. Unmute your button. And my question is going to say the same. What is really, as somebody who's no stranger to innovation and diversifying and making sure that embracing new and upcoming technology works for the benefit of your company, for your corporate, for your conglomerate is now, how do you think companies have fared in the past 2 years of this pandemic, and what's your outlook going forward?
My company is, to give you a background, mostly in the electronic engineering manufacturing services worldwide, right? So in United States, I have a factory make about 200 people in Los Angeles. Factory is working reasonably well. We have been impacted mostly by component shortage in the semiconductor business. There are about 5-6 semiconductor companies which supply most of the semiconductor chips that drives the electronics world, especially the Taiwan company TSMC, which is the largest foundry in the world, supplying most of the chips. So those things are the biggest problem that we are facing, the component shortage and the logistics problem that somebody was saying about the shipping and freight costs going up, and also the time to get the components on time. So those are the factors that have affected the United States business here. So that has an impact, but overall, the US company, the electronic manufacturing company that I have, which we supply these vital electronic products for major corporations here like Boeing, etc. We are doing it okay so far, but not at the peak production level. The business that's been little impacted for us is the component shortage, semiconductor chip shortage that worldwide is a problem. And that has an impact on us, and that has curtailed our production somewhat in our factory in Thailand. We have one factory in Thailand. It produces oxygen generators for especially in these times we need these portable oxygen generators. So we are this company is a major supplier of that, and we are the major producer of that for them. So that has been impacted somewhat because of the component availability by major semiconductor companies like Renesas in Japan, here in the US, as well as Taiwan, and all that. That's the impact that we primarily have. As far as our production is concerned, we are okay by practicing the social distancing, mask, all of that, vaccination. Things are okay. We have not been impacted by people available in the factories or in the offices.
So, Mr. Hassan, it's very interesting. You say that there is, of course, clearly and understandably an effect seen on not just procuring components as far as your main companies are concerned, on also logistics and shipping. Those could be potential challenge areas in a post-pandemic world. But as an entrepreneur who's been in the business for more than 30 odd years now, run so many successful companies, do you believe there has been a slight difference in the way governments in the West, especially in the US where you are, have approached boosting demand, making sure that the country and the economy somehow bounces back with some sort of government handholding? Do you see a difference in approaches, let's say, between the governments of India and the one in the US, the Biden administration for that matter? I won't talk about Trump because that's a whole different story. But would you say there is a difference of approach, and which one has been more effective?
I do not fully understand the impact over in India, but I have factories in Bangalore and in Kochi, etc. So those, I think, have been impacted somewhat by the shortage of people having these COVID problems. But again, the production is moving on reasonably okay now with regard to government policies and practices. Here in the United States, we have been reasonably effective, at least in where I operate. The 50% of the people are vaccinated, and the vaccination is reasonably effective with the the mRNA vaccine of Pfizer and Moderna is what we give here, and they are effective. So in India, I don't know whether that's been that effective or not. Our operation in Kerala is not doing well. It's working okay, but there is a problem there. Now, what the impact here is mostly the component supply, the chip supply, semiconductor chip supply worldwide is a problem. In US automobile industries, the production is low. That is a big issue here. Now, prices have gone up, even used cars and new cars, prices have gone up because of this. So,
if I was to ask you, Mr. Hassan, what you would feel, or given the fact that you have mentioned a couple of problem areas which have compounded, fluent business being conducted not just in America but across the world, what would you say are the three most important things that corporates of various sizes in various sectors need to be on the lookout for if they need to not just stay afloat and do well, but also grow in a post-pandemic world? What are the three most important things in terms of strategy or implementations that corporates need to watch out for from here on in?
That I can only talk about in the United States. We have
Yes.
50% of the population is vaccinated. Okay? 50% of the population is vaccinated. The other 50% is not vaccinated. So if you look at the manufacturing sector and the whole economy as a whole, kind of proceeding reasonably well. If you look at our stock market is doing well, economy is growing, and the Biden administration has taken a liberal policy of supporting people to stay home and get paid $2,300 per person and all of that. So with this kind of programs by the US government, I hope things will get better. Our biggest problem is now going to be shortage of working people. We find people, why should you go to work? If you get $2,300 every week, why do you have to work? You have people, difficulty getting people to work on the kind of working level people, you know what I mean? Not physical laborers and office workers. It's a problem. This kind of approaches, I'm not in favor of that, but I think we in the United States have to succeed it based on our work ethic. You know, people have to work hard. And
you know, it's interesting, Mr. Hassan, because I don't know if many people know this, but you have been in the past a regular contributor really to both political parties, and I know for a fact you've also contributed to the Biden campaign as well. I'm sure if you believe this government is too liberal in terms of giving out what many people call the dole or call it pandemic handouts, I'm sure your word will carry weight in the White House.
well, I don't know that. I am only a small cog in the wheel here. But the problems of shortage of people is the critical factor here. You know, the working level people is a problem. I am what I call my personal philosophy. I'm a social Democrat, but I'm also a capitalist. I don't think you can feed everybody in the world by nobody working. I don't know how that works. But you know, if you look at China, you know, they don't practice communism over there. They all work very hard. People are working very hard. They produce, but they talk. Communist Party, it's a name, but actually it's not communist system. It's a capitalist system.
A social democrat who's also a capitalist. It reminds me of my college days. Anil, somebody asked me, what am I? I said, I'm a socialist who likes money. And kind of befuddled them for a bit. So I think very similar to what Mr. Hassan is saying right now. I think we have come to a point, Anil, where we can have your views. At this point, if you have any questions for Mr. Hassan, please go ahead. At this point, I believe this is the right time for a question, Anil. If you have a question for Mr. Hassan.
Yeah, sir, I have a question for you. What can a government do when everything is down to generate demand? So these dolls, you know, from the US administration is basically to generate demand that will help all the companies at a later stage.
Well, here in US, the Biden administration has a $3 trillion stimulus package going on. $3 trillion. You know, that is
plus change, yeah.
Yeah, 3 trillion is a lot of money flushing around in here. There is no shortage of money supply here. I think this is going to have a huge impact on inflation in the coming years in the country, and that's what I worry about, the inflation situation because of this thing. And secondly, the shortage of people wanting to work. If you keep people stay at home and all of that, and give them this money, I think that is not going to be helpful. Maybe that is necessary from a politician administration point of view, but I'm talking about as a practical businessman. I would recommend that we keep that on a need basis, not as a general policy basis, you know. So, I don't know, that's my opinion. I'm not getting involved in it. So, keep work with the system, whatever it is, and, you know, and make it the best you can. What else can I say?
Does that answer your question, Anil?
Yeah, of course.
Any other questions for maybe Pankaj or Dr. Sharma?
No, I have a question for Dr. Sharma. Because some sectors in India did really well, especially larger industries. And some of the sectors are accused of monopolistic practices or oligopolistic practices where there were cartels existing in some sectors. Should the government turn a blind eye to such practices, considering the current situation we are in?
See, having monopoly or bipoly is definitely not good for any business. If you look at, let me give you an example of steel sector. They were the first one to go to the NCLT. And that time through the steel policy and the way the NCLT was managed, we ensured that monopoly didn't happen. All the plants did not go to few. You know, we have a very widespread and we were able to get the best players of the world in India. So today you have all the players who have a name in the sector in India with a very strong, robust policy looking at 2030. Now, in some sectors where we are heading towards bipoly or monopoly, there is a very huge risk which we are going to face because that will then disrupt the entire supply chain. And going back to the question what was mentioned before, that this may lead into small startups being eaten away because the entire policy will then started working for those sectors or those owners of the company. So this is where the government has to have a word of caution. We do have competition commission which is supposed to look into these factors. I'm very sure with the alert media and business sense, these things will come into picture. And many players are now coming because now you are having multiple players. If you look at any of the fields, you except for say telecom or some of the businesses where it is heading towards this kind of a problem, rest of the places we do have a space for many players. So I think that word of caution has to be there. There is absolutely no doubt about this. We have to be absolutely clear on this point in mind.
All right. Hope that answers that one, Anil.
Yeah.
Great. Anil, would you like to add a few remarks before I think Anagha is no longer in the conversation, I believe.
She lost connect. She's in Bombay and is heavy rains. She lost, I think, her connection.
I think we're also approaching our estimated time limit. In case you have more specific questions, Anil.
Pankaj, I wanted to ask Pankaj, what is his outlook for manufacturing in India? Because there is hardly, I can't see any manufacturing activity happening. Apart from people like Javad Hassan, who invested several years ago, he runs some high-tech manufacturing companies in Kerala and Bangalore. Apart from that, our manufacturing industry is low tech. So what do you think? What do you think will happen? Will we see a pickup in manufacturing activity in India?
I personally expect a huge pickup because the world has realized that they cannot keep all the eggs in one basket, which was China earlier. And therefore, the world is looking at multiple countries, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand. It is up to India how quickly we can scale up our infrastructure, attract investments from overseas, but definitely some investments will come. The other thing is that the private investment, which was on a hold for quite some time, the earnings were muted for many corporates in last several years. I think many large corporates have earned good money in last 2 years, and therefore the private capital investment cycle is starting again. So one side government is investing, second side private investment is happening, and third side foreign capital inflow is happening. So I see a bright future. There are a lot of companies which are talking about high-tech things also, like car batteries, There's discussion around semiconductor. So a lot of discussions have started happening, and huge potential. I think in the times to come, we should see a big pickup there.
There you go, an optimistic outlook as far as manufacturing is concerned for India. Various factors, of course, go into it, and we still have to see how the rest of the year goes. But fingers crossed, clearly, and hoping that manufacturing, not only manufacturing, but also other sectors pick up, even though some of them, of course, are in dire need of hand-holding. Some, of course, need a big investment push, really. And Anil, of course, it's been I started off as a business journalist, and like and it seems to me back when I was a cub reporter, there's still this debate going along, and the government was trying to pass the buck to the industry, and the industry was trying to do the same, saying that more private investment is needed, more push from the private investment industry is needed. Where do you see that now? Do you think private players, at least in India, need to basically add more weight to their effort in boosting demand and boosting growth?
I feel that India's business class is basically a trader class. I don't see them investing in technology. I don't see them doing real manufacturing. So I had discussions with a lot of Bombay companies, some of the largest manufacturers in India. What happens is now they bring their stuff from China. So I think, like Pankaj said, there's a next investment cycle, the huge, investment, amounts coming from Indian industry. That's the only thing that can save the, manufacturing sector in India.
Okay, that's Anil's views on the manufacturing sector in India. Any follow-ups, or anyone would like to add something before I start wrapping this session up? Dr. Sharma or Mr. Hassan, would you like to add something?
Well,
Yeah, please.
Yes,
Mr. Hassan, go ahead.
Go ahead, sir.
what I'm saying is I am a risk taker myself. When 30 years ago, when I started electronic manufacturing in Kerala, the Delhi bureaucracy told me I'm going in the wrong place to begin with. Kerala is where people are not very work-oriented, etc., strikes and very active in that area. So, but anyway, I had a commitment to do something from the place where I came from. So I have made the investment in Kochi export zone, and I've been reasonably successful at that. And I am very pleased with the productivity of the people in Kerala. They are much better workers over there. And I'm very pleased with our performance over the last 30 years in Kerala. So I think this perception that these people are very active and all that can be managed. It depends on how you manage those people is the key. Because the political activities in Kerala are very active. There's so many parties and very, it's a very educated class of people, high literacy and all that So to operate there, from a point of view, is difficult. But I think we have been reasonably successful. Our management in Kerala, the managers have done a good job keeping the thing going. There was no strikes and all that there. Now we have been impacted by this COVID quite a bit over there, but we're still moving along reasonably well. So my point in the Indian manufacturing question that you raised to Pankaj, I think Indian manufacturing is a necessity. Manufacturing is a necessity. You want to be an independent country. Like China has done a remarkable job in manufacturing, a factory for the world. So that is going to change because of various geopolitical situations. That has to change, and that will change. Whether India will be a player to take up that, it's not clear in my mind. But it may or may not happen. I don't know. I think possibilities are there. Supply of people are there. I think it is the infrastructure and all the other stuff.
Well, clearly the opportunity is there for the taking, Mr. Hassan, and I completely agree with you there, especially in a post-pandemic era. The world is going to look at alternatives, and my only worry, of course, is that countries like Vietnam, even Bangladesh for that matter, and many others in Southeast Asia might just be quicker to the draw because they have slightly more streamlined policy procedures and clearance procedures and have a far more organized system, less red tape. The question, I believe, then is whether India is ready to take the opportunity that's arisen, or will it go begging? Would you agree, Dr. Sharma?
I'm an optimistic person, and I don't like to mince words in saying that future of India lies in MSME. But having said that, it is very important there has to be a clarity, consistency, and a convergence in the holistic approach to the policy. You can't have knee-jerk or crisis management kind of policies. You have to untangle every problem or every impediment that is coming in the growth, because as very rightly said, it's a competition among the world. So India will not be a preferred destination unless until we provide this consistency and credibility. Because if we want our youth to be not to be a liability, then I think we are at a no option zone. We have to tighten our belt and move ahead, and we have shown successes in many of the sectors where we adopted this holistic approach, but still a lot to do, and definitely not for complacence.
Absolutely. On that note, with Anil's permission, unless he has something else to add, have we completed, hit most targets, or do we leave something out, Anil?
I think so.
Great.
Despite technical snag, no, we managed to cover most of the ground we intended to. I think it's good going.
Well, that's great, Anil. This was, of course, to remind the viewers, the latest installment of Delhi Dialogues presented to you by Policy Circle. Anil Nair, founder and editor, is, of course, on the panel. Anil, I must thank you for inviting me to moderate the session, giving me the opportunity, and also to the panel for their very, very valuable time and their extremely valuable inputs. I hope this has been a good conversation. I hope we raised some important and pertinent issues. And to the best of my knowledge, most of my questions were satisfactorily answered, but of course, with a pinch of their own style. All the guests, I must thank Anagha Deodhar, who joined us. Also, Dr. Sharma, Dr. Aruna Sharma, thank you for your valuable time. Pankaj Poddar, is great to speak to you, and I do wish you the best of luck with your diversification process. And I do hope that your company and your subsidiaries do well, as we hope to speak to you very soon. Last but not the least, I'll ask Javed Hassan to formally close the session. And I thank you, sir, for your time and your invaluable input as well. I'll leave it to you for the last word before I actually close the session. If you could wrap up your remarks in a couple of lines, Mr. Hassan.
I think this program that you, Anil, and you are doing is a good one to bring up various points of views on the subject of the economy, growth, and all that. So I think this this initiative by your policy circle is important to bring more dialogue and input into the system than just rhetoric. So I think this is a good initiative that you have, and I hope it succeeds well and becomes very effective. All right?
Javed Hassan, I thank you for those kind words, and thank you for the encouragement. We do hope we can do more such sessions, and we do hope we can count on your continued support and engagement as we move forward with daily dialogues. Before I wrap the session, we must not forget to thank Tata Steel, without whom the good men and women at Tata Steel who thought it was important for this conversation to come out. Thank you for your association, and thank you, Policy Circle. You can catch Policy Circle in the latest updates on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn. Please do subscribe to Policy Circle, join it, and keep abreast of the latest policy developments in India and around the world, primarily India, but hopefully around the world as well. Thank you all again for your time. And with that, Anil, with your permission, I'm going to formally close the session. Looking forward to the next one on the 21st of January. What are corporates looking in terms of a skill set for their leaders and their management? That's on the 21st of August. Don't forget to tune in then. And those of you who couldn't join us in this live session will very soon see an online version of the entire conversation. I'm sure Anil and his team will make sure that happens. Thank you all. Thank you, Anil Nair. This is Athar Khan signing out for now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.